the Holy All Saints' Day catastrophe. On the morning of November 1st, 1755, the citizens of Lisbon, Portugal, were gathered in churches celebrating All Saints' Day. Without warning, the ground began to violently buckle. One of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded ripped through the Atlantic seafloor just off the coast. In Lisbon, massive fissures split the streets open, and grand stone cathedrals collapsed onto the congregations inside. Then came the second act. Fleeing the falling debris, thousands of survivors rushed to the wide open safety of the city's docks. As they stood there, they noticed something strange. The sea had completely pulled back, exposing the muddy seafloor. Minutes later, a monstrous tsunami surged out of the Atlantic, roaring inland and sweeping away everything left standing. To make matters worse, hundreds of fallen candles ignited a raging firestorm that burned for days, melting building materials and completely altering the geography of the riverfront. The disaster was so physically and culturally devastating that it forced European philosophers to fundamentally rethink their views on nature, science, and the structure of the world. The day the Earth shifted, in the modern era, we like to think our advanced technology makes us immune to the whims of geology. We aren't. On December 26, 2004, a massive megathrust earthquake ruptured along a 1,300-kilometer stretch of the seafloor off the coast of Sumatra. The sheer force of the Indian plate driving beneath the Burma microplate physically lifted the ocean floor by several meters, displacing a massive volume of water and unleashing a devastating tsunami across the Indian Ocean. The geological shift was so massive that it actually redistributed mass within the planet, causing a minor permanent alteration to Earth's rotation and slightly shortening the length of the day. Just 7 years later, another megathrust earthquake struck. On March 11th, 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake shook northeastern Japan. The seafloor near the epicenter lurked forward horizontally by tens of meters and pushed upward vertically. The resulting tsunami completely reshaped 400 kilometers of the Japanese coastline, dropping sections of the land permanently by up to 2 feet and allowing the sea to push far inland. The physical landmass of Honshu was moved several meters closer to the North American continent, and the planet's actual axis shifted by several inches. It was a clear, undeniable demonstration that the ancient, violent forces that shaped our world millions of years ago are still very much alive and still fully capable of shifting the ground beneath our feet. The Ghost of Doggerland. Around 6,200 BC, deep beneath the icy waters off the coast of modern-day Norway, a sleeping giant woke up. A massive section of the continental shelf, an underwater territory the size of Scotland, suddenly collapsed into the deep ocean trenches. This wasn't a slow shift. It was the Storegga Slide, a colossal submarine landslide that displaced thousands of cubic kilometers of sediment in a matter of hours. The sudden movement unleashed a monstrous mega-tsunami that raced across the North Atlantic with terrifying velocity. It battered the prehistoric coastlines of Scotland and Scandinavia, but its most profound impact was felt in a low-lying, fertile land bridge known as Doggerland, which connected Britain to mainland Europe. Towering walls of water rushed inland across the lowlands, completely trapping and drowning its Mesolithic, human inhabitants. The disaster permanently severed Britain from the continent, sinking an entire inhabited world beneath the North Sea forever, and proving that the ocean floor can rewrite human geography in a single afternoon to buy. The Deluge of 1931. The deadliest geological disaster of the 20th century didn't erupt from a volcano or fall from space. It arrived as water. In the early months of 1931, central and eastern China experienced an incredibly harsh winter, leaving the mountains packed with massive amounts of snow and ice. When spring arrived, heavy thaws coincided with an unusually intense monsoon season, topped off by a barrage of consecutive tropical cyclones. The region's major river systems, including the Yangtze and the Yellow River, simply could not handle the sheer volume of water. The rivers burst their banks, tearing through ancient flood protection networks and dikes. A massive expanse of central China, an area the size of England, was transformed into a shallow, muddy inland sea for months. Rivers permanently carved new channels across the plains, completely stripping topsoil and depositing thick, suffocating layers of silt over towns and agricultural lands. The region's waterways remained altered for decades, a reminder that even humanity's largest flood control systems can be overwhelmed by nature. The sea that woke up. Go back 5.33 million years, and the Mediterranean basin looked entirely alien. It wasn't a sea at all, but a vast, dry, sun-baked desert depression dropping miles below sea level, completely isolated from the world's oceans. But the Atlantic Ocean was creeping higher, pushing against the narrow strip of land connecting Europe and Africa at the Strait of Gibraltar. Then, the barrier gave way. What began as a small stream quickly tore open into a colossal gateway of destruction known as the Zanclean Flood. A torrent of water 1,000 times greater than the flow of the modern Amazon River roared into the basin. The waterfall was so immense that its roar would have been deafening for hundreds of miles, creating a localized cataclysm that filled the entire dry Mediterranean floor in a matter of months, with water levels rising by several meters a day. It radically re-engineered the global climate, altered oceanic circulation, and permanently flooded a landscape, creating the Mediterranean Sea we know today. The 3-minute apocalypse. On May 8, 1902, the citizens of Saint-Pierre on the Caribbean island of Martinique woke up to what they thought was a routine volcanic awakening from Mount Pelée. They were wrong. The mountain did not just spew lava, it unleashed the ultimate demonstration of volcanic speed and violence. The side of the volcano literally ripped itself open, discharging a pyroclastic flow, a superheated avalanche of ash, toxic gas, and pulverized rock, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour and burning at over 1,000 degrees. In less than 3 minutes, the roaring cloud slammed into the thriving colonial city, instantly vaporizing its infrastructure and suffocating its entire population. Out of 30,000 residents, only 3 survived. It was a harrowing reminder that geological violence on a human scale can erase centuries of civilization in the blink of an eye. Empires in the dust. Natural disasters don't just shape rocks, they break human civilizations. Around 1600 BC, the Thera volcano in the Aegean Sea experienced one of the most violent explosive eruptions in human history. The blast tore the island of Santorini apart, collapsing its center into the sea and creating a massive, underwater caldera. The collapse triggered giant tsunamis that raced across the Mediterranean, battering coastlines and shattering the maritime infrastructure of the advanced Minoan civilization. Combined with a blanket of thick volcanic ash that poisoned regional crops and sulfur gases that cooled the climate, this single geological event destabilized an entire ancient superpower. 17 centuries later, nature struck Italy. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius exploded with a wrath that caught the Roman towns of Pompeii and Herculaneum completely off guard. It wasn't just a rain of rocks. The mountain unleashed pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of ash, rock, and toxic gas, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour. Rivers were choked and redirected by the sheer volume of debris. Fields were turned to wasteland, and entire cities were buried perfectly intact beneath meters of hardened volcanic material, freezing a single Roman afternoon in stone for millennia. The volcanoes that stole summers. In April 1815, Mount Tambora erupted with such extraordinary force that its summit disappeared. It was the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. The explosion was so powerful that the mountain's summit vanished, leaving behind a massive, deep crater. Rivers were instantly blocked by volcanic debris, creating unstable, new lakes, while forests for miles around were completely buried. Far beyond Indonesia, the millions of tons of sulfur dioxide thrown into the stratosphere formed a dense global haze. The following year, 1816, became legendary as the year without a summer. Snow fell in New England in June. Continuous freezing rains ruined crops across Europe and Asia, triggering widespread famine. Just decades later, in 1883, its neighbor Krakatoa followed a similarly violent path. The island volcano exploded with a sound so loud it was heard nearly 3,000 miles away, the loudest sound in modern history. The physical collapse of the island into the Suna Strait triggered massive tsunamis that wiped out coastal villages and permanently altered the regional seafloor, while the global atmosphere was pushed into months of bizarre, vivid sunsets and sudden regional cooling. The day the sky turned ash. Skip forward to just 74,000 years ago. Early humans were already wandering the landscapes of Africa and Asia, completely unaware that the ground beneath modern-day Indonesia was quietly preparing a catastrophe. The Toba supervolcano didn't just erupt, it violently blew itself apart. It ejected thousands of cubic kilometers of ash and toxic gas into the sky, creating a colossal plume that blanketed huge swaths of Asia in pitch-black darkness. For hundreds of miles around the eruption zone, the sun completely disappeared behind a wall of gray dust. Once the underground magma chambers completely emptied, the weight of the mountain above became too heavy to support. The entire landscape collapsed inward, leaving a massive, yawning crater that would eventually fill with water to become Lake Toba. The sulfur particles blasted into the upper atmosphere acted like a giant mirror, bouncing sunlight back into space and triggering a brutal, global cooling event that lasted for years. While early theories claimed this event almost drove humanity to total extinction, modern data suggests the impact varied, leaving our ancestors to survive in a radically altered, chilling new world. The cosmic reset. For millions of years after the Great Dying, dinosaurs ruled the planet in a relatively stable world, until a quiet morning 66 million years ago. A rock, the size of a mountain, traveling 40 times faster than a bullet, slammed into the shallow sea of what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The impact didn't just cause an explosion, it fundamentally cracked the planetary ecosystem in seconds. The energy released exceeded the combined destructive power of humanity's nuclear arsenal by a staggering margin. Rocks were instantly vaporized, shockwaves rippled through the globe, and a ring of hyperheated debris was blasted straight into the upper atmosphere. The immediate blast was devastating, but it wasn't what caused the mass extinction. The greatest devastation came in the weeks that followed. As that vaporized rock cooled in the high atmosphere, it formed a global blanket of dust and sulfur aerosols that completely blocked out the sun. Day turned into permanent twilight. Temperatures plummeted into a bitter, artificial winter. Without sunlight, plants couldn't photosynthesize, causing the entire food chain to collapse like a house of cards. When the skies finally cleared years later, 3/4 of all living species, including every single non-avian dinosaur, had vanished from the face of the Earth, leaving a completely vacant world for a few small, burrowing mammals to inherit. The Great Dying. Imagine an eruption that doesn't last for days or weeks, but for 2 million years. Around 252 million years ago, in what is now northern Russia, the crust tore wide open. What followed wasn't a neat, cone-shaped volcanic eruption. It was an absolute flood of liquid fire. Day after day, century after century, molten rock gushed from the interior of the planet, eventually blanketing millions of square kilometers in layers of black basalt thousands of feet thick. Today we call this scar the Siberian Traps, but the lava itself didn't destroy the world. The real killer was what was hiding beneath the surface. As the magma forced its way upward, it cooked massive underground deposits of coal and carbonate rocks. This launched astronomical amounts of carbon dioxide and methane straight into the atmosphere. The planet warmed at a terrifying speed. Acid rain stripped the land of its forests. As the oceans heated up, they lost their ability to hold oxygen, essentially suffocating marine life from the bottom up. By the time the atmosphere stabilized, over 90% of all marine species and the vast majority of large land animals were gone. It remains the closest life on Earth has ever come to being completely wiped out. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you learned something new, be sure to give the video a like and let me know your thoughts on which of these geological catastrophes terrified you the most in the comments below. If you'd like to see more videos like this, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.